this is me. So rather than have you read through a biography, that's me. Yes, Dr. Mohammad Yunus, the current chief advisor of Bangladesh, is somebody that I am advising. So he's a boss, and that I can talk about. Was one of the group of 12 members of the diaspora who were asked and invited to assist him. I've been asked to help write the AI Act, which I was working with the White House and bilateral congressional groups as well, youth empowerment with AI for the country. It's 180 million people in Bangladesh, half the US population squeezed into a landmass equal to the state of Iowa. And of course, they're not going through a really good time either. But that being said, you have to constantly learn. So that is actually Reed Hasty, statistical learning in a class, and where we're doing just very few of us, getting to work with him directly and so on and so forth. And I also happen to be one of the few things I don't really talk about is, yes, I'm Bollywood executive producer. We have a movie project going on in the US and there. And so we do have a pretty large cast, and because the LA fires, we got into a little bit of a hiccup with financing. So yeah, that's also still going. That being said, this is a point I'm going to try to bring up over and over again. But what this generally means is that a lot of people, a lot of professions will say, nope, this is hard. This is not for you. Or you can't just come in here and change the way we work. Bovine excrement. Yes, you can. And so I know normally I would be a lot more forceful when I say this, but a lot more detailed, but you get it. If you put the right level of focus and effort and you keep at it, yeah, there's a lot that you need to do. This age of AI is defined by that. And if you want to thrive in this age of AI, this is exactly how, these are the barriers you're going to have to break. So we've been talking about this, and I've been using this slide quite often, all the different types of everything that goes into AI. And every single time I would ever present it, like literally it would be days or weeks apart, I would have to update this slide, because there are always so many different models. Here it's AI agents. Most of these I wouldn't even go with right now at all. So these change over and over. I guess people are taking pictures, but this is honestly, it's become rather old. So where do you start? Where do you really start? What is it that creates those opportunities? Not just the use cases, and certainly not the proof of concept. You've got to understand the organization. You've got to have people in the organization, work with them, who would tell you, here's how you engage with our customers. Here are all the processes that are involved. By the way, anything you do needs to be multilingual, multimodal across any and all different types of platforms. It is important that your models, your solutions work on a mobile phone. I know it's kind of basic, but it needs to. Securely meeting the organization's compliance, security standards, everything else. Now, you can't just help like one function and say, yeah, here's how we're going to simplify it. Well, their biggest challenge is going to be they're dealing with other people in the organization. So whatever you build has to be self-serve. There are a whole bunch of other characteristics as well. Those are the areas that you sort of laser focus in. To get to, you could come up with all of these potential use cases. These are actual projects that I and my team have done. And before you all take a picture of all this, and we talked about this in the panel, if you all recall, waste of time. Absolute waste of time. Because what that's not going to do is I want to see startups who keep going on and on about, yeah, we can do this. Of course you can, because you figured it out. But who's really winning there? The hyperscalers. the Microsoft Azures, the Google Compute Platform, GCP, AWS, of course. And then outside of the US, you have Baidu and Tencent and their clouds. And internally, you have a whole bunch of others as well. They're the platform providers, OpenAI and Anthropic as the model builders, and there will be others. There will be others. You had DeepSeek, and as I was showing a few other people earlier, on the agentic AI side, you have Manus.im. The DeepSeek equivalent, exactly like it, from a small little hedge fund in China, which works way better than anything else we've got out here. Unfortunate reality is for those of us who've gotten access to it, where when you go to manus.im and you do their replays, and they have a vast library, impressive vast library of fully automated, you put in a prompt and it goes and does all this for you. Like you say, go win a Kaggle competition. That was the first one I picked. And honestly, it blew me away. It goes, picks a Kaggle competition, logs in, starts downloading the data, builds the machine learning solution, submits it, gets you on the leaderboard. Now, when you do the replay on Manus.im, you're going to think, oh my God, this thing is just going, oh my God, like I'll be done, I'll be a winner and everything. That takes about 6 to 8 hours to run. So you have to get the prompts right. Prompt engineering is an important engineering discipline. It really is. Don't joke about it. So we talked about this, but I went even further than this earlier. This point on how to even build solutions on SAP. This is the general framework, but we talked about the example of, well, you can do journal entry commentaries and variance analysis on SAP, where you build the models that replicate the workflows and steps of financial analysts to look for those variances that reach past certain thresholds. So you're able to look at the metadata, and it triggers based on, well, it exceeds a certain threshold. So now it needs to go out and interact, find other data sets to explain, okay, here's what probably happened. So the LLM needs to understand the context, needs to understand, here are the other data points that I'm going to need to get to verify, experiment, and assess, summarize, and generate the content that is as good as what people do. This isn't just steps. This was just a first slide of here's how we're going to do it. Let's go ahead and do it. And I already explained earlier during the panel talk that it took one senior data scientist, one AI engineer, myself as the architect building it, and a project manager. And we got it done in a matter of weeks. This did not take months for the largest company in Florida. So this is a messy slide. This is what happens when you're trying to produce this like literally moments before. But here's the point. Kind of look here. We talked about Salesforce. Even Salesforce, Benioff recognized that LLMs were going to change everything. What is Salesforce? As a CRM, they are a system of record. They just store your data. For all their design chops of coming up with these beautiful icons and campaigns to sell their product, is Salesforce as a platform going to win any design awards? Has anybody here used Salesforce? Because almost all the companies where you provide the majority of your dollars and cents use Salesforce. Is Salesforce going to win any design awards? No, but they are a system of record. They have all the data. So LLMs, AI, agentic AI, even Benioff saw that matters. Because all he's got is just another data store. So he pivots. He tried this a few times. He brought in another company that I don't know how much I can say. So he brought in one of those startups, a startup that was nothing but a data science company for the last 10 years. Only in the last 18 months, they pivoted and said, oh, this whole agentic AI using LLMs, this one's a big deal. Let's try to do that. They were fortunate enough to be physically located in Silicon Valley, in the heart of Silicon Valley, just outside the Google campuses where their offices were. They kept funding going. They had the right connections, you know the right people, so they had a stream of support coming in. Networks matter, human networks matter. That allowed them to develop a really compelling platform that Salesforce was using. Until Benioff said, yeah, we got to do this all on our own. We can't be relying on other people. Because you've got all of this is an A16Z chart. Look at all of just the startups that they're supporting that are going after Salesforce. And that company isn't even listed here, yet they were using them. Until Benioff says, no, we've got to eat our own dog food. Pivot to Agentforce as they rapidly try to build their own agentic AI platform. Meanwhile, you have Palantir. Has anyone here used Palantir? Oh my God, why the hell not? I'll tell you why not, because it's extremely expensive. You don't work in government. You don't work for the major corporations. Palantir's AI platform is astronomically better. It's far more than just connect your data and build a chatbot. Well, if you look at what they do, they are providing real, meaningful intelligence that interacts in real time with people, augmenting the work in the field. And yes, they're not cheap, but it works. And it is battle tested. So while everyone here, let's be clear, we're trying to catch up and provide that cheap. So now we're getting into flipping over into how do you build it? And I admit, this slide I have used for 2.5 years or so. You kind of go from the bottom up. You have data. You start with data. And then you have your existing data solutions, your machine learning models, everything else, the transformations that happen, as well as data collection, data preparation, data governance, all of that matter. All of that's here. And then you have generative AI. It absolutely does not matter what LLM you use. You never want to be locked in, because any and every single LLM you pick is going to have problems. Usually, OpenAI's LLMs used to be the best, but they have problems. They're being sued by the New York Times. They are being sued left and right. And if you're a major organization, or I had questions about shareholder values earlier during the panel, like how do you justify it? Yeah, exactly. How do you justify to shareholders that you are using the services of a company that perhaps used their public data incorrectly or in ways that they shouldn't have? There will always be problems. So this layer doesn't matter. Do not be locked in, because you want to engineer this layer where you can flip on a dime to anything else. And then you get to AI orchestration to enable all the use cases, but the bars to the side are extremely important. You have to have the observability. You want to keep an eye on your solution to make sure it is not going off the rails. This is the AI governance piece. You want to be able to track that. You want to be able to assess that. You want to do the auditability and tracing, everything, as well as access control, the security and access control. Your solution needs to know if you should be doing this. Should I be able to go into our AI models that are fully connected into our backend systems and say, I'd like the home address for my CEO? Absolutely not. I shouldn't have that. The LLM shouldn't just be telling me, are you sure you should ask that? That seems a little unethical. No, it doesn't even have to get to that compute cycle. There should be protections that say, you don't have access to that, even if you go into your HR Workday raw data set. You shouldn't even have access to that, so why am I going to provide it to you, even if the system itself does have access to it? Absolutely important. When you've got all this, then you get into use cases. The AI orchestration, this one is hard. So let's double click on that, shall we? This is AI orchestration in a bit of a nutshell. Yes, this is a picture-taking worthy slide. So we'll try to cover all this for the next 3 hours, okay? This is the world according to me. So what we're trying to build is, at the end of the day, you have the systems of record. These are where all of your data all sit. Now, if you're a small company or you're only exposed to small companies and so on, so you're saying, okay, well, financial data, so we'll just get whole bunch of CSV files that have all this financial data so we can do these transformations and so on. That's great, that's cute. But when you're going in front of any small to medium-sized company, they're going to say, yeah, all of our finances sit on this cloud with this particular vendor who we're paying this much money. They handle it all. Okay, well, we need access to it. Great. Here's a number that we think belongs to the vendor. Go figure it out. They're going to give you an API. Maybe that's how you'll get access to it. That's there. Those are the things you'd have to deal with. Or if it's larger and they own all that, well, it's going to sit on multiple instances of these cloud-based platforms, whether that be ServiceNow, Workday, SAP, Salesforce, and the list goes on. So by the way, tip, if you're a large organization and you want to cut and show your shareholders you've cut billions of dollars, then get rid of your legacy back-end systems. That's how you take off billions of dollars. Then you get to operations. And I know I'm going backwards here, but you also kind of start with experience. Before I go a little deeper, any questions as we've come pretty far already. Any questions here? Wow. Everyone's, yes, please.
So right now, John Motors and all the other automakers are trying to figure out autonomous vehicles and other AI systems within cars for automated experience, right? Does any of that for the getting the history, getting the radar, lidar technology, does any of that come into this multi-layered?
I can't talk about it. I cannot talk about it.
But I'm close, right? I am.
Can't talk about it. Well, you know what? Let me throw a wrench at you. I work in human resources. I don't work in propulsion. But I am an AI guy. Any other questions? By the way, I'm so sorry. I'm not here representing or mentioning anything to do with my employer whatsoever. All right. Let's try to have some fun here. You've got to start with the experience. And these are just some of the things that matter. We're going to build up from understanding this to, okay, where do you get ROI? How do you even measure it? What are those commercial measures that you have to demonstrate? So this is kind of important for you to understand. You start with, you're going to build the personalized experience. You want to augment people. So what does it take? What does it take to augment people? There are certain ingredients that you're absolutely going to need. You're going to need like the security parts. It's going to need to be multimodal. Your culture. That's not a technical thing, but it's really important. Because what you build needs to be a tool that your people and the people you want are going to be really good at. They can use that tool to do, compared to, say, today's standards, to the 2 or 3 or 4 times more productive. That's why you're building it. So those folks, that culture matters because they have to evolve. How do you connect to all the data? Companies don't own all their systems. It's on the cloud, which means it is sitting with other people. Hopefully they don't share it. Hopefully. Well, in order to get access, we call just APIs, but even that term, simply APIs, encapsulates so much more. What kind of API? Are you using SOAP APIs? Are you using query languages forms? Are you using JSON web tokens? What kind? How does that work? That stuff has to be engineered. That's where your really brainiacs in the company are working on. Now, you could bring in outside consultants, but then you're not bringing in the big companies to do it. Then you're looking for specialized talent. Who's got this all figured out? How do you find them? So, and then you work with the partners and vendors. You squeeze them and say, well, you know, we need this. How much of this are you going to build yourself? We hear all this stuff with like manus.im and so on, and everything OpenAI is doing. Where are you going to infuse that into your product so it does everything securely? So you have to work with them too and push them too, which is why that startup I told you about, the big system of record, acquiring them for $3.85 billion. Not bad for 18 months worth of work. So this one's kind of pretty obvious. All of this designed for, even in the models, we talked about zero inference and so on, similar concepts. Let's kind of move on. You guys are like getting really bored with this slide. No? No. Okay. 45 more minutes ago. Well, here's how you do it. Now I'm jumping quite a bit. We talked about the technical problems. Now let's flip over on the business side. This is just page 1. How do you build the business case? Now, if you're just doing a simple proof of concept project, yeah, that's just like, okay, does it work? Yes or no? How much did you save of one thing? Okay, it was saved 2%. Maybe it saved 25%. Doesn't matter, that's it. It was for just that one thing. But if you're going to do a full transformation and you want to try to build something that is much more, these are the steps that you have to figure out. One of the things I was thinking about is maybe we should take an example of something. How do you build, like if you were to use this as a playbook, how do you start building that commercial value proposition of an AI-enabled process? What is that process? It's not just step A, step B. It's saying, okay, how do you improve your supply chain? Your entire supply chain function. How do you automate that? How do you build in that real-time decisioning, augmenting the work that people have to do, accelerating how they do it? Well, you kind of have to start with what's the strategy, what's the purpose, what's your objective? And then what's the structure that you have to work with, the functional side of it? What are the processes involved? Are there constraints? That's really what governance really also points to. And the priorities. Who gives you the mandate? Who gets the value? What are the metrics that you would measure? Do you have the right people? Do you have the right engineers? Do you have the right developers? Almost 30 years later, as Steve Ballmer's running back and forth on Microsoft stage going developers, 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 almost giving himself some kind of coronary event. It's still true. You don't just take this offshore. It is important for these people to be part of the organization, literally working from headquarters physically. You don't do this stuff remote. This is the reason why you need people all together. This is the reason why Apple's campus is built like a flying saucer. So my buddy who lives, he really lives here in Miami, his family and everybody is here, but he's the product manager for Apple's. He used to be one of the coolest things, $300 billion business. He was the product manager for AirPods. He's a Miami guy. Then he went to the MacBook Pro line, he's product manager for that. I don't know where he is now, but he sits next to the product manager for the goggles. He's never even, my friend never even put the goggles on, at least not the last time we met late last year. He hadn't even put it on because you can't just touch any Apple device when you're working there. But the whole point is you're gonna have people working collaboratively, cross-functionally. And those people have to have that right orientation. That's the culture you need. You don't want just like the finance people only talking finance. You don't want the supply chain people to not talk about automation, machine learning, prediction models, or so on, and only talking about contracts, and missing that maybe having a really powerful, well-orchestrated, well-built, purpose-built LLM tool that can allow them to review massive amounts of contracts could really help them. We'll get into that in just a moment. What are the hurdles? Data, not always readily available. Analytics, not always readily available. Do you even have a good, solid understanding of the workflows and processes? Because once you start looking, you're going to find things that were broken. You're going to find enterprise process steps. And I have been, one of the good things about being a consultant is you get to work with, I've lost count how many different clients, customers, or so on. You get those consultants when you're in their organization, you get the emails too. God, I've had every single email. This is something any and every consultant will tell you too. Same thing. We don't brag about it, but whatever. You kind of see like everybody has this problem. And then cross-functional. By whether it be single function, then you start going to cross-function. And then when you can kind of solve it, you kind of get to, okay, these are the things, this is the kind of thinking that you now have to put into a spreadsheet. And becomes a very, very large bespoke financial model. Yeah, this is how you do AI. So let's take a particular workflow or process. This is a typical RFP process. This is something that all consultants certainly face. You submit to a request for a proposal that's issued by the company, you put it on their website, and they say, okay, submit a proposal by this time, and you will have spent weeks until literally the very last minute of that deadline to have prepared a proposal to submit. But what happens when it gets to the company? And the procurement team, they're not going to be doing just one RFP. They'll have been issuing and managing 50 to 100 RFPs that are ongoing at any given time. That's why you have a procurement function. So how do they work? Well, they create an event, they provide the evaluation criteria, outline, prepare the documents. The documents have to be approved by legal, by whatever other function. Everybody internally has to say, this is all the information that we can provide. We're not going to come back and say, whoop, we have some new requirements, because the RFP's already been issued. Make sure everybody gets their ducks in a row, and you submit that. And then you kind of weigh, it's a big winding process. You can kind of read this yourself. So on each of these process steps, could we automate something? Could we use something that's LLM powered, that is secure and just kept within the company so there is no data leakage? We don't want people on the outside to know that an RFP is going to be issued early or give them some competitive advantage that opens the company up to legal risks. So how do you ensure, you build that? Could we build those things here, and take this whole long winding process and simplify it to a very simple thread with people at the beginning, people at the end? That's it. That's it. Could we do that? That's your solution. Architect that solution if there's a strong need. If you've identified and done all of the commercial ROI models from what we talked about earlier, that shows if you do this, your savings are going to be $2 million a year. How much is it going to cost to simplify this process? $200,000, $400,000. You save $1.6 million per year. Well, just the first year, because after that, your cost basis is now lower. You're going to have to come up with even better savings. But that's the idea. That's the idea. In a nutshell, this is the simplest capability use case. Now, if you are trying to do a proof of concept, if you're a startup, if you're doing a proof of concept, you're usually coming in because there's a team that is working on simplifying this process, and the only thing they've exposed you is, yeah, can you guys build a purpose-built LLM-based model that will do that little bit? Yeah. And you're, of course, excited and go, yeah, I'll do it for free. Just give us a chance. We'll show you how. Great. The company is going to take that learning and compile that across the board, because ultimately they want maybe one platform vendor to do it all. But they are not going to share that information even while you're working on that one little piece, and you're going to knock it out of the park, because I know you will. Any questions? Oh, I am depressing everyone right before dinner. That's not good.
What about automation or using LLM for creating the RFP? So I know that we have humans in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Were you mentioning also automating the RFP as well?
Really good question. Would you risk that?
And by not necessarily creating the RFP, but by, let's say, answering the RFP for the client.
So that's the augmentation piece. Grant asked a really good question. If you're going to automate this, why don't you even start with automating the entire RFP event creation? Well, this one is just setting up and creating the event and setting up, helping to create the first draft. But you still need people, I would think, in this example, you would still need people to say, okay, I need you to start. Here's the inputs I've got. Now, normally over here, this process might take a few days to weeks to kind of figure out, okay, here's what's going into the RFP, let's refine it, let's draft it, and so on. Here are the inputs. Somebody has to put it together. Over here, you're just using an LLM, Gen AI Ops, an AI-powered model, basically something like a super RAG tool and so on. That's all you're using here. So the idea is you get to do this in a lot less time. So rather than taking up to 2 weeks or longer, it condenses down to maybe a day. What are the savings there? That everyone's time multiplied by the average wage, multiplied by the opportunity cost of everything else they could have been doing with that lost time that they focused on doing just this.
So when you're actually executing
Yes, Tim.
So when you're actually executing on this, what's your philosophy as far as breaking it down? So get the summarization piece working in
independently, get the scoring piece working, and then try to orchestrate it together? Is that the philosophy?
Well, this is part of the work, just figuring out the workflow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the orchestrating and solution, architecting the solution all comes after. So now you've gotten a sense of the entire workflow process, where the opportunities for improving are, where everything will fit. These are inputs into figuring out what's the new solution going to look like.
And when you're actually building it, do you build each piece separately and get it working, get the eval working for summarization independently, and then do the same with scoring? Do you find it better to break it down into each individual piece, build that, and then build it together, stitch it together, or do you find it's better to, or is it just kind of one big project?
My feeble answer, one big project. I don't like what you're indicating to me. To me, my experience and my biases translate what you're telling me into what it sounds like in my head is, oh, sounds like project management. Sounds like a whole bunch of agile, this and that, and all of that. So we're going to need to put all this into a freaking Azure DevOps board and track everything in the project management. This timeline, honestly, at that point, I have lost what the heck my team and I were setting out to do. That's just my worldview, based on my biases, my experiences, for better or worse, maybe you can otherwise. So there are no, I don't know if there are standard answers, but that's the approach.
So I have a question. You mentioned MSI. There's a technical gap and there's a distribution gap currently. You have to sign up. Suppose an agentic solution like that, an omni tool, to solve every problem that a user has. What would be the pivot for other companies to distinguish their own products?
So if I may rephrase your question, so I understand.
I guess, to put it another way, if a company comes up with an agentic tool that can do anything on the computer, what's the recourse for other companies to stay relevant?
Oh, once we figured out the grand unified theory, is there any need for anybody to do any more research? Probably not, right? Great. If that company has figured out a tool that does it all, then for a while, that will do it all, and then the opportunity for everyone else will be figuring out what that grand tool still does not do. And they can focus on that. All that does is put a premium on the hardware problems. Technology strategy, if you kind of study it from an academic basis, as I have, you have the whole S-curve and so on. That exists because at every point, when you're trying to develop a new and better technology, that works well, inflection, but then something else comes up. There's always going to be a need. That's my point.
Thank you.
Great question, thank you. Oh, great questions, but please don't stop. Please don't make me feel like I am depressing you. We're almost done, I think. So when you start doing this, this is live. Now, this is granted a few years old, but these are real numbers of actually building these capabilities. And you can see the kind of productivity improvement that you get. These are the metrics that go into that you can use as a heuristic in building out some of those models. But before you run too fast with this stuff, again, it's a couple of years old, the numbers are radically different now. The solutions are much different. But it gives you, the whole point is not to give you numbers that you can use. Sorry, you can't use these, but this is the way you have to think about it.
So why is it so hard to adopt AI? This isn't just the reasons why it's hard. These are the things you have to solve. This is the solution. These are the answers. You need strategy and value. How are you going to do it? What is the workflow that you're going to automate, you're going to improve, you're going to build? What are you going to use now, next? Technology and data, what are you going to use? Do you have the training data internally? You don't want to use, even if you use the latest OpenAI model, you don't want to use its pre-trained knowledge for your purpose workflows. You need to fine-tune it. You need it only, literally, the prompt engineering is going to be great, you know the world, the OpenAI model, but don't tell me any of that. Anything you do, refer back to my own data only, because I need you to give me citations that are mapped to my data, my knowledge, my documents, my articles, my financials, all of that. So you can do that auditability and the governance stuff for every model output. So all of those interactions have to be built around your data. Do you have access to that? Large companies, almost every single one have messy data. They're in all sorts of places. The big four accounting firms, I worked for two of them. Well, I worked for one of the big four, it was the big five. Arthur Andersen blew up. That was 5 years of my life. I was orange blooded to the core. We would find, even in the older days, a lot of data would sit on servers that are sitting underneath someone's cubicle desk. That is not an exaggeration or euphemism, that is a fact that exists today. I got that from the CIO of one of those firms, the current big firms. Client data sitting on servers, server boxes underneath someone's cubicle desk. So data matters. Experience design. One of my panelists, one of Microsoft, she mentioned the Stanford D School. Yeah, really important. Because at the end of the day, if users don't use your super cool AI technology, guess what? It was like a brilliant idea on the back of a paper napkin. It's worth no more than the paper napkin itself. It's all about execution, right? Well, same thing when it comes to design. If no one's using it, it ain't worth much. It ain't worth anything. That's where the value comes, the utilization. Hyperscalers know this. That's why they want you to use, they provide the incentives for you to use their platform, their cloud platforms and tools more and more. Is such a question time. The question was changing management in the talent pool. So that question points to the culture. And all that means is you want a culture that is AI literate. Because that's foundationally, you're applying foundation models to help build all of this. So you want people to understand, okay, one way that I work is I like to take out a piece of paper and draw this and point these things out, and so on. Well, now you don't do that. Now maybe you have Microsoft Copilot on Excel. You don't have to come up with fancy formulas or anything. You can just go to Copilot and prompt your way and do some incredible analysis. So now you've changed someone's thinking of how to ask and converse their way to doing their job. as opposed to, man, I have to put it on a piece of paper, then I put some numbers here, then I try to look up how to do this formula. So you have to have culture of people who are willing to look at their own work from a whole different lens. It's just something that comes with practice. I hope that answers your question. Thank you. Please.
You mentioned about value comes in utilization, right? So that's basically the adoption part of it. So you were talking also about how hyperscalers really have figured that out, right? But if you have to recommend anything for especially a bunch of startups that I'm pretty sure that are over here on how to make sure their solutions are being adopted, what would you recommend?
For their solutions to be adopted is, so you're a startup and you're coming into an organization and doing a proof of concept. And your objective is everyone in the company is going to use your tool and product and it will completely transform the business. Your best hope, find some really good financial engineers, figure out a way to take a market-based position in the company so you become the aggressive, what is it, takeover? Do a takeover of the company from the CEO and point yourself as CEO and decide this is how we're going to do work from now on.
I mean, I
know that's an awful,
Yeah.
I joke, but here's the practice. That is a joke. It's kind of like the damn talk down, so I can't, not poorly done, right? Yeah. The way to do it is actually not based on technology. It's recognizing the organizational dynamics. So if you're that startup and you're doing something, use that as a stepping stone. While the POC is working, to go and network with other people within the organization to say, hey, I want you to know, we're doing this. And so we'd love for you to jump in, stakeholder in another function, onto this POC, if it can derive some kind of value. So what you're doing is maybe you got successful with an RFP to do one little piece of that, and you don't know, or you should know, that the company's stakeholders who are telling you, hey, you guys are doing great job on that little piece, that they're only going to use you for that little piece. So you use that as a stepping stone to figure out the entire org chart, and you go to everybody else and go, hey, we're doing this. Would you like to attach your use case? And this is how we could do it. And if it's valuable, here's another contract. Organically grow your contract. Recognize how that company is set up. Recognize the politics, the deep politics that are in any organization, and work that to your advantage. Don't piss one group off against another. Don't do something being, I see this often with even the largest big name consulting firms. They don't appreciate the internal politics. They think they are like, oh, we came down from heaven and we're going to help this company. It doesn't work that way. Yeah. Meanwhile, while the consultants may think they're the greatest thing, the clients are going to say, that guy was such a blowhard.
So basically, it's creating a ton of awareness within the company, so that everyone is knows your solution, not just only one person.
Bingo. But at the same time, don't do it so loud that everybody says, hey, you guys are doing this little thing, and why are you broadcasting it to everybody in the organization? You just have to do it really, really smart.
Okay.
This is where the social dynamics and social psychology factor in more than anything. To be a really good salesperson in that organization, you've got to master social psychology.
Awesome. Thank you.
Of course, fantastic question. Thank you. Yes, please.
Any more questions?
Grant just tells me that I'm really keeping you all from dinner.
I was just following up the S-curve thing that you mentioned, and then this is more from the perspective of continuous improvement. I just wanted to know, how would you approach your end-to-end monitoring with your team? How do you ensure your models sort of adapt to evolving societal norms or sensitivities? For example, a few of the stuff were valid a few years back, now they're not, they're considered inappropriate. So you build models for a company, and then how do you make sure that you revisit and then you keep those updated with the ongoing trends? Or
Related to that earlier question, you can kind of see where this is going. The idea is you built the models, you embedded yourself in that company for that one little task in order to ensure that you do not get disintermediated or become obsolete. You expand the scope of what you do within that organization. So you need to actively build on those relationships and those workflows and the value proposition, the efficiencies that you're bringing constantly. The continuous improvement isn't just on the technology side, it is on the utilization side. Hope that helps.
yeah, definitely. Thank you.
I say that from experience because I've seen that work. Sure.
Thank you.
There were a couple other questions.
Or a question back here?
So I just had a question about if you're a small company trying to get into a large company to provide a service or tool, what are some tips on getting your foot in the door? And are there certain, I guess, patterns that companies go through, like maybe certain times of the year, certain things that you want to hook yourself into to be under consideration?
I'm not that good of a salesperson to be able to answer that effectively. I will say, yes, there are indeed patterns, there are relationships, there are events. What I have learned the hard way is it really is the human one-to-one connections. It is, in Chinese they call it guangxi, in Arabic they call it wasta. You need to enhance your guangxi and your wasta. There is no literal English translation for those terms. What it means is your social capital, your social network, your social capital that you get from your social network, where people will only do business with somebody they trust has vouched for that person. So you need to approach sales, technology sales, or any kind of sales from that angle to put yourself at an advantage with your target organization so that you enhance your wasta, your guangxi, with the stakeholders in that organization so they know to call you. And usually when you do that well, that salesperson is going to be so embedded with that company, their career is around that big company. So I know sales leaders at the highest tiers of consulting organization, they're dedicated entirely to just one client, whether that be one of the big clients here in Florida or anywhere else. They are the person to sell to that company. They know everybody and they are so embedded in that even when senior executives, all the way up to the CEO, need to know what's going on in their own company, they'll be calling that consultant, that sales guy. Because that sales guy's got his or her ear to the organization. They know the inside out. They know everybody. And that already preassumes that they understand the politics. That is how you know how to sell. And you can get that repeat business and you can expand it in all sorts of ways. Thank you. Very good question. That really took a lot out of it.
Well, that was an amazing answer, and one more answer to go. Jim, oh, amazing. Yes, one-time community member, thank you so much.
And John's been a community member with the data science community that I have known and seen him since 2015, 2016.
Whoa.
So, yeah.
Amazing. Well, here you go.
So you mentioned Volunteer as sort of a special case. I was wondering,
Which one?
Palantir?
Palantir. Yes.
What makes Palantir stand out, specifically maybe from my UX perspective, if you tried?
Yeah. It's sexy as hell. And there are others. And this is not a big secret. in the data science, machine learning space, when I part of like, so all that, what was the one big company that everybody thinks of? H2O. Their driverless AI, which automates, the whole proposition for them, something, and you could go try to find data scientists, the best one you can get, pay them $200,000 a year with benefits and everything else, or you can pay H2O $200,000 a year for 6 seats, so you effectively get 6 data scientists. And all you're doing is pointing your data, and it builds out the fantastic predict models, manages multiple models, does the model management on its own, deploys it, just works. And their brilliance wasn't in the workflow orchestration or the auto ML or any of that. They open source all that stuff. They could charge the massive amounts of fees for their service because their design was sexy as hell. Take a look at it, H2O.ai. They've been around for probably almost a decade. Palantir is very similar. If you look at their tools, they not only make the design experience specific. If you look at Foundry, Gotham is old. AIP, they have a few different broad enterprise scale platforms and products, very well built. So it's not just the really good engineers, but the really good designers, UX designers, usability designers, all of that.
Does Palantir kind of focus on state level actors, militaries, that kind of stuff? Isn't that kind of their sweet spot? Or no?
I mean, look at their annual reports and quarterly reports. That's a big one, easily, probably half. And it's not just one government, it's multiple, but the private sector as well.
Let's do a few more questions. Like, let's say 2 or 3 more, maybe 2, but here you go.
I will make it worth your time.
So looking at this slide, do you see a fragmented AI agent market over the next 10 years? Or do you see the hyperscalers taking all of it? Can the hyperscalers build a tool that can really help organizations take any role in their org chart and create an agent for it? That's an oversimplification, but you kind of think of it like that. I'm sorry, and then this is one of the things I'm thinking about, is that, well, is it a little bit like Excel, right? Lots of Excel users, but if you really want to get something done, you still go out, this was happening, right? People even do it now. You go to somebody who understands it even better to help you build that thing, right? So will we be a fragmented agentic AI market, consolidated? I'm not saying we all know exactly, but what are your thoughts on that?
Really good question on just the overall industry. Are all the industry players in particular sectors and problem set areas like agentic AI being one of them now, will they always be fragmented? But here's the thing, first and foremost, while this is a specific AI applications and sales market map for which this private equity vendor, I think we had a speaker from ex-Andreessen Horowitz here earlier, that they have some relationship or investment or something to do here. It is not a comprehensive picture, but there is a map similar to this for every single industry vertical, as well as going back in time as these things reach a certain point, their hype cycle and attention, that they've had similar maps. Point I'm trying to make is there will always be these pictures that make it look like there are a lot of players, and gives you the idea that it's fragmented. No, this is not fragmentation map. This is a competitive marker, right? So here in Miami, according to the Knight Foundation from the early aught years, I believe the number is still consistent. I spoke with someone from Knight and said, yeah, still pretty much true. Miami has more startups than Silicon Valley. since for a long time. However, the difference is where a lot of startups in Silicon Valley have an opportunity to thrive. The ones in Miami, I think 90% of them fail in the first 8 months. And that's the number. That's not a painful reality to address, which have a lot to do with network effects. So, and competition. So again, all it says is you're going to have lots of startups, and this is just a competitive map, only a few of these are probably going to make it. If you look in this space, I don't even see a recognizable agentic AI platform name here, to be honest, unless you know of any. So that's my point. It's not that it's fragmented, it's always going to be competitive.
No, when I use the word, to me, fragmentation is reflective of competitiveness. So that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah. I think it's always going to be competitive, no matter what. And agentic AI is not the be-all, end-all. I'm going to say it right now. Because agentic AI possibly is going to get better, and it's just going to be a way we work, like with Excel. It's just the way that we're going to do a lot of workflows and processes and so on. Through that, there are other big problems too. Because ultimately, wouldn't it be nice to have a Fortune 15 company with only 2 people that generates $400 billion a year in revenue? How would the profit margin on that company be if it just only had 2 people and an army of agents? As Jensen even said, IT is going to be the new HR. Okay? So is agentic AI the be-all and all? No. That's just sort of like you're just building some part of the rails. But there's going to be a lot more of business operations and workflows that have to be figured out. And so how do you automate some of that? So let's just focus on just augmenting people rather than the science fiction notion of like, because at that point, as the business gets that much more fully automated, if one company can do it, so will every other company. And then it just becomes nothing but a plain old commodity. Everything you want to do is sell about this, whatever. The world's going to look very different, but there will be other opportunities for people to build stuff.
Amazing, amazing. Well, I thank you so much for answering those questions.